Hello, my name's Michael Garvey. I'm the chairman of Buckinghamshire Business First, and I'm delighted to be hosting the latest edition of our Talking Heads podcast. And I'm even more delighted to be joined today by Yvette Lamidey, who is the director of the Business Locksmith and the FSB area lead. But I'm not going to do too much of an introduction. I'm going to let Yvette introduce herself and start by telling us a little bit about what she does. So, Yvette, hello and welcome.
Thank you, Michael.
Delighted to see you.
I'm going to have to correct you, I'm afraid, because I'm not the FSB area lead. I'm the English policy representative for the FSB. But that's not a problem because I cover both roles as well. So, like many people, I started my own business because what I did in corporate world seemed a natural thing to do when I decided I was no longer employable and started up my own business. So I've been running my own business since 2004. So 20 years next year. So that in itself is quite unusual, as you know, among many business owners. But it's also morphed a lot. So what I started out doing was very much the professional skills, knowledge, etc. that I had from my corporate role I was taking forward, but found I spent more and more time coaching people. And also when I was looking at the metrics for a business around their efficiencies, reducing risk, increasing compliance, it was just the same old story with everybody. What I really loved was getting down into the people things. So over time, I've trained, done a number of qualifications in understanding how human beings work and understanding more about how small businesses work. So I've morphed very much from doing that really complex, boring at times, I have to admit, because it certainly bored me. And I'm pretty sure that when you start reading 50 or 60 page reports, they're pretty boring for everybody else, but they're a necessary output, and turned it into much more of how can I support you as a person in your business. But along the way, I also found I was really interested in supporting small businesses with the issues that they have around compliance with government legislation, with the impact that they have on what's happening in the economy as a whole, because unfortunately the very large organisations allegedly write the biggest checks and therefore have the biggest say with people, whereas actually, as you and I know through BBF, small businesses are actually the backbone of the business economy in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And it still amazes me in Buckinghamshire that my business, for example, employs 12 people. That makes me in the top 15% of employers. It's astonishing the amount of small businesses, but actually when you aggregate them, the huge impact and the contribution they make to the exchequer. So actually, I think there's going to be a theme that's going to run through this podcast today, which is about the importance of small business. And obviously, you've done enormous amounts of work with the FSB, which we can touch upon. I want to talk about the work that you've done with BBF, and obviously we've known each other now for more than 10 years, I'm certain.
Yeah.
You're a current board member and a very important board member of Bucks Business First, so we can talk about some of that as well. And I also want to talk about Milton.
Another role. Sorry, yeah. I talked over you.
Don't worry. I'm expecting that. And obviously, the work you've done in Milton Keynes is something that I really want to focus on as well. So I think we've got sort of an overarching theme of small businesses, BBF, FSB, and the work that you've done in Milton Keynes. So you're clearly somebody that is committed to the business community, like myself, given enormous amounts of time to help support other businesses. What do you think drives that passion for helping businesses?
I was doing some values work with a client over the last few days, or a couple of clients actually over the last few days, and it goes back to justice is a big thing, and justice, people think of the law, but I'm thinking around there has to be a balance in justice in how the world works, and that's needed for the support of small business. I am very much around giving back as well. It was the ethos I was brought up with. It was very part of, you know, where we went to school, how we thought, and I get, you know, I can't deny that I don't get pleasure and enjoyment and fulfillment from doing this work. So it is not altruistic by any stretch of the imagination. I get something back from it, rarely financial. It's just around knowing that you've made a difference to people. And also, there has to be better ways of doing things as well. The old adage of that's how we've always done it, whether it's something that the Treasury are talking about, HMRC or whatever, isn't necessarily the best way. And you and I in our business careers have seen massive change in how things are done. I mean, when you first started out, I bet you weren't thinking anywhere near as much of all the online stuff you were doing around surveying and business design, it's building design, any more than, you know, any other business. So, you know, if we just need to find ways of doing things so that as a business owner, what you're doing is you are growing your business and generating the income in your business, which is adding to the economy because you're employing people. As you're employing people, they're able to go and spend money in the local economy on all sorts of things. So it's how a community thrives. And if you're spending such a large amount of your time filling out forms, being compliant, worrying about how you're going to cover off this bill and that bill because some edict has come in and things have increased in price, and you've now got to cover that off and cover off your employees' salaries, etc., then that stifles your business. So, and
I think there's a huge problem, as we know, with productivity, and that's been apparent for a long time, hasn't it? I was speaking with some people a couple of weeks ago about the burden on small businesses in particular of regulation, administration, the form filling that you referenced, you know, having to think about compliance. It seems to me that for a lot of small businesses, there's a great layer of bureaucracy now that really absorbs time and real money. And so that's a big issue. And obviously you're speaking with lots of small businesses. How do they feel about that burden? I mean, I guess it's something that we're all probably a little bit sick of.
I think when people are in trepidation about what's going to happen today, I know this dates it as opposed to an evergreen podcast, but today is the autumn statement. Yesterday, an announcement was made about the national minimum wage. Now, as part, the justice part of me recognises that younger people have the same budgetary responsibilities as people who are 25 do, but the impact that increase in national minimum wage from April next year is going to have is that my hairdresser around the corner might not be able to survive because she's looking at a £5,000 a year increase in the salary of somebody. So she's got to bring in that additional business to cover that person's salary. So they all have knock-on effects. That's going to have a massive impact on the leisure, tourism, food and drink businesses as well, isn't it? Of which we have many in Buckinghamshire.
Well, indeed. And you've just given me a bit of a segue actually into asking a question about the work that you do with the FSB. So it often occurs to me, certainly when it comes to property related decisions the government make, I sometimes wonder who they talk to, because policies come in where you think, well, I could have told you that policy wasn't going to work for whatever particular reason because of experience and market knowledge. So I guess the FSB at a national level is about trying to influence political decision making from the point of view of the small business.
Yes, very much so. So we have a team based in Westminster whose job is solely to be interacting with political leaders, and of course coming up to where we are at the moment, potentially 12 months away from an election, who knows who our political leaders or who will be in government in 12 months' time. So we do talk to all of the parties. We go to all the party political conferences every year. And last week we had a meeting in London, and we were specifically looking at business crime. Now, you and I know that we've had a lot of BBF members reporting cybercrime.
Yeah.
And that's on the increase. On the Buckinghamshire Business Group, there's been a lot of reports around increase in shoplifting and abuse of staff in retail.
Yeah, that's a big issue, certainly.
Mel Williams at High Wycombe has told us many a story that makes your hair stand on end, because it's not the behaviour that you and I would expect to see in a shop. And so we've also found that the police, as we know, police are understaffed, and they're not able to necessarily attend all of the crimes and deal with all of the crimes. So we've come up with suggestions for the police and crime commissioners, but also for the Home Office, saying, can we not have a system where if I've got proof of a crime, I can upload that evidence, which is immediately available to whichever police force I'm reporting it to? And how can we make this so that a business owner knows something is going to happen? Because we hear that if shoplifting is less than £200, very little is done. But that's around sentencing. So we've got to break down these perceptions. There's a massive difference, and I understand that people might steal a loaf of bread because they literally need to feed their children, to the organised crime that's going on. And there is a significant amount of organised crime where you get a gang of 3 or 4 people go in, someone attracts the attention of the security staff or the staff were in the shop, and the next thing you know, someone's walked out with a load of staff. And a small business just doesn't have that element of security, etc. So they are being picked off even more. So we come out with these reports, half a dozen a year, which are always geared towards this is a solution. It's not just around a complaint. We are offering a solution. It's backed up on evidence that we've got from our members. We hold round tables. We get different organisations to support us in bringing that evidence together. So it really is sound evidence, and it is looked upon by MPs as being really important. So I met Rob Butler, one of our Buckinghamshire MPs, in Parliament in September, and we just produced a report on technology. And one of the things that was really important in there was around productivity, as you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
He actually is really keen on getting a conversation going in Westminster Hall about what are the barriers to growth in small businesses. So we know we've got some really good MPs working in Buckinghamshire who understand business and really want to support
absolutely.
it. So we are doing that constantly. There's a round table coming up for self-employed people, one this week and one next week, because many people are not limited companies. They are sole traders, self-employed. And they too have different calls on their time with the reporting they have to do. Could get much worse with making tax digital and the things that sit around that. So it's understanding the pressures on those people. People often call them lifestyle businesses. You and I know that phrase, but it's a lifestyle business that enables somebody to often run their home and support their children the way they want to do, bring in the income that is enabling them to have the life that they want, or even for some people literally just putting the food on the table, and then enabling them to grow that business in the future. And lifestyle businesses, I get very cross because they're almost as if they're not worth worrying about. Why would we invest in those? Why do we pay any attention to those? But if those people weren't doing those jobs, they may be claiming benefits.
I was just thinking that very thing, which is, those lifestyle businesses are providing income for people and families who are avoiding them having to claim benefits. And actually, if everybody was productive in employment of whatever type and able and capable to look after themselves, the burden on the state would be significantly reduced, wouldn't it? So I think you're right to highlight that. And actually, you know, we talk about Buckinghamshire, don't we, as the entrepreneurial heart of Britain. It's a phrase I've used hundreds of times over the last 12 years or more. And it's a small business economy. And I think you slightly reference it. You know, those small businesses don't have the resources of the big businesses. They don't have the, you know, the HR director, the finance director, the marketing director. You know, it's those owner managers who are having to do all of this themselves. And I think, you know, they should be congratulated for staying in business, let alone, you know, making a profit and making a positive contribution to the exchequer. And actually, we find, don't we, that a lot of those smaller businesses are also making a significant contribution to their community.
Oh,
you know, with volunteering, you know, trustees of charities, you know, the PTA. You know, it seems to be in the mentality, doesn't it, of small business people who are more connected to their community than the bigger businesses, because they often work locally, live locally, the kids went to school locally. And that's something which is hugely valuable to our communities, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Milton Keynes has historically had head offices of a number of organisations that have only recently started to get involved in the Milton Keynes community.
Yeah,
it's as if it was a convenient place to be because it's easy to get to London and, you know, whatever deals they got on the premises. But now they are really starting to get involved in the community. I mean, Santander have built a new office space called Unity Place, which is going to be their European head office. They've committed to having all of their board meetings there, so they're bringing more people into Milton Keynes, and they are making space available to small businesses. So they are beginning to work with small businesses. But, you know, we have an ecosystem here which is perhaps quite unusual in Milton Keynes because we are a young city, 54 years old. We don't necessarily have the history of, or we probably might be 55 now, don't have necessarily all the history of other areas, although we've got some older parts. And I find that I'm very sad, if you like, about the political boundaries that sit around Milton Keynes and Buckinghamshire. Just because I'm 2 feet over a line that somebody has drawn to say that this is a Milton Keynes and this is Buckinghamshire as a part of the unitary authorities. You know, I might still consider myself to be a Milton Keynes business, but, you know, my business support has to come from elsewhere. You know, I can't talk to these people because I'm not deemed to be a Milton Keynes business. But conversely, it works the other way around because, as you and I know, business doesn't see those geographical barriers.
No,
they
exactly.
They just want to work together. And, you know, we know that, you know, there's a lot of innovation stuff going on in Milton Keynes, which is also being mirrored at Westcott, for instance, and other places like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those businesses are finding each other, but we don't necessarily have that replicated as you go up in the support system. And it's how we can bring that together. And that, I think that's one of the roles that BBF are doing. I mean, we spent time looking at our strategy, and it was, you know, how can we include Milton Keynes and Buckinghamshire, and how can we get people in Milton Keynes to recognise that they are part of Buckinghamshire, because it is a two-way thing. And,
absolutely.
It's going to take time, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And we've sort of segued very neatly into a sort of Milton Keynes conversation. So thank you for that. You know, the work that you've done in Milton Keynes is hugely valuable to the business community, not just in Milton Keynes, but across the wider region. And as you've put it very well, you know, that sort of boundary issue we have. So obviously Milton Keynes is part of ceremonial Buckinghamshire, but not part of administrative Buckinghamshire. You know, we've got different politics in play, and that can be a barrier. It shouldn't be, but it clearly can be. But as you say, the business community in Buckinghamshire doesn't recognise borders or boundaries. I mean, obviously, BBF, we have 15,000 members, but membership extends beyond the the borders of Buckinghamshire, because we recognise that people trade not only internally within the county, but you know, with neighbouring businesses in Hertfordshire, Oxfordshire, you know, the old Berkshire, London. And therefore, it's about supporting businesses, isn't it, to be the very best they can without limitations. And certainly, you know, imposed administrative or political boundaries are something that businesses don't recognise and should never get in the way of a business developing and growing. So let's talk a little bit about integrating the business communities, you know, within Milton Keynes, within Buckinghamshire, the work that you're doing, the work that BBF is doing. Now, of course, you know, this is happening anyway, organically, and it would happen without the help of organisations like the FSB and BBF. But I think, you know, we can accelerate the situation, can't we? We can help people to make those connections. But tell us a bit more about some of the work you've done.
I suppose I found Milton Keynes by accident. To me, it was always north, as you referred to earlier before we started the podcast. So I ignored it, and I was living in Wingrave, which is just outside of Aylesbury. And I found that because it was so flipping awful trying to get into Aylesbury to network, it was quicker for me to turn right and go to Milton Keynes than it was me to turn left and just go a few miles to Aylesbury. And I found a completely different business community there. I found, I went to something called 4N at the time, which still exists, but it's not in the world that I knew it. And I used to go to breakfast and lunch meetings in different places within the borough of Milton Keynes, as well as in the centre of Milton Keynes. And I met people who really wanted to support business and really understood business. And then with my FSB role, I had a branch role, as we had in those days, that covered North Bucks. So it was Milton Keynes and Buckingham, basically. Then I took in the rest of Bucks, and just how I met Philippa and so on. And so I was bequeathed a chair of something called Milton Keynes Business Council, where we bring all of the business representative organisations together, plus the universities and the colleges. And we are looking at things like the plan for Milton Keynes. So Milton Keynes chief exec comes along, the councillor responsible for economic development comes along, and they use us as a sounding board for proposals. We also engage with people like East West Rail and Milton Keynes Development Corporation when they're looking at changes they're doing in Bletchley, because they got some money for a town fund in Bletchley. You know, the only thing people think about in Bletchley, unfortunately, is Bletchley Park. But there's a lot more to Bletchley than that.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Most visitors, when they go to Bletchley, they're driving into Bletchley Park, they're going to Bletchley Park, they're not thinking about anything else that sits around it. And so it's helping raise the visibility of Milton Keynes as a place to live, a place to work, and a place to grow your business. And that's one of the reasons why another business that I've co-founded, Central Archangels, came in place, because people were going to London to get their funding for their business, which means they're being encouraged to move to London. We've got high net worth individuals in this region. We've got fabulous businesses in this region. Why can't we join the two together? So I've been working on that. So I've been doing some tasks that most people would think are as boring as hell, like responding to consultation documents. But it's making sure the business view comes across. So whether it's what's happening to business support when the LEPs disappear next March, looking at how the plans are working so that we can make sure, if road closures take place, we've got examples of road closures which are impacting on an area for months on end, which means that those businesses are almost cut off from their community.
Yeah.
So your business wouldn't suffer quite so much because people don't come to your office.
No, exactly.
Much. But if you're a hairdresser or a restaurant or whatever, you're going to suffer massively. So we get involved in all of those things, in raising the profile of that. So as they're reimagining Bletchley High Street and Fenny Stratford High Street, it's, what are you doing about parking? I know the ideal is to have people walking everywhere, but you still need that parking.
Yeah.
What have you got in the way of a banking hub? Businesses still need to have access of places to put cash because people still pay by cash. So I get involved in all of those things around what makes a business community thrive and how we can support them, whether it's looking at the local authority, how they're supported through the next level up. We haven't even talked about the Oxford-Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership, which Buckingham is just rejoining, and the opportunities we've got there of becoming even more well known as an area to thrive. And in the middle where we are, the whole of Buckinghamshire is, massive opportunities there for business with inward investment coming forward. And our smaller businesses being able to support those larger businesses that come into the area. So the opportunities that we've got as a county coming together and working together on that, with all the business organisations coming together, can really make this area thrive and grow and develop and be a place for the future and not just now.
No, exactly. And I think that's the important role of organisations like, the FSB and BBF. It's about highlighting, the challenges that businesses are facing, the opportunities that are available, because a lot of these smaller businesses are just sort of, head down, focused on what they are making, selling, the service provision. They just haven't got the time or the energy really to put into policy. And I think it's really important. And I think that's primarily, the role of BBF. And I bring the conversation back to BBF, which is about, supporting the business community, creating a community for those businesses to talk to each other, to share the pain that they are experiencing, and also to celebrate the successes they have, sharing best practice and knowledge. There's lots of programs that BBF runs to, provide education opportunities, networking opportunities, even the opportunity to get some money to help invest in technology or people. It's a very multifaceted organisation, but it's all intended to help business, support business, encourage people to start a business, to grow a business, and on the journey with them to help them survive what is, some really sort of choppy water out there. So we're sort of coming to the end of our time, and it's flown past. So thank you for being so interesting and engaged with the conversation. It's really been interesting for me to hear your perspective, actually. But just thinking about 2024, I was listening to Radio 4. There was an item this morning. They were talking about, what does 2024 look like? As you've referenced earlier, we've got the autumn statement today, that prospect of some tax cutting, which is probably driven by politics and the imperative to be re-elected than any long-term financial plan. But how do you see 2024 planning out? Is it sort of more choppy water? Is it, perhaps an environment where businesses can breathe slightly easier? What are your predictions for 2024 for the business community?
In many ways, I think it's going to be more choppy waters because costs are still increasing for business. We haven't seen a reduction in energy costs that is manageable. We know that access to good people is really still very hard, but also access to people in general is still really hard. We've come across so many businesses in certain sectors that have had to reduce the hours because they simply can't get the staff to be able to be open full time, which obviously has a knock-on effect to the economy, but also has a knock-on effect to the community where that business is based. I know that large London firms are starting to lay off professionals, accountants and lawyers, which is going to work well for us because we've had a terrible trouble employing people in the professional level because London has been so attractive to them. So we can pick people up. But, you know, what does that mean? Because there are fewer commercial deals being done at the moment. They're coming to a standstill. And that then sort of trickles down through the economy as a whole. So at the moment, I think it's not going to be a lot different to 2023. And sadly, when any government comes in, they are going to have so much to do that how they're supporting the business community isn't necessarily going to be in the top 5 things they're going to do. So, you know, we're all looking for what's happening to replace LEPs and the business support, and knowing that that's going to continue because support for business is so important. I mean, BBF has set its stall out in the most useful way. It wasn't necessarily the most useful way to government at the time that it was set out, but actually it's turned out to be the most useful way because you can continue and you've got opportunities to do things, or we have opportunities to do things that others haven't. But I am very concerned about next year. When I look at the businesses that I work with on a one-to-one basis, you know, some of them will continue as they are, but not necessarily massively increase their growth, but others are going to be very, very in a delicate situation. And
yeah,
that's
I tend to agree. I think, you know, for all the sort of perhaps political grandstanding around things getting better, and one can understand the messaging that's required in the run-up to an election, I don't think the fundamentals have changed a great deal. So I think it's, you know, it's going to be as important as ever for organisations like BBF and FSB to support those business members, to get them through, you know, what seems to be an extended period, doesn't it, of challenge. And I think the way the world is changing, that challenge is likely to continue. So Yvette, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining me today for this Talking Heads podcast. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and thank you on behalf of the business community for all of the excellent work you do. It is, you know, hugely appreciated, and people like you make a real difference to people.
Thank you. Very, very kind.
Okay,
perhaps we'll talk about the access to funding at another time, because
yes, exactly. Well, there's some really important topics we haven't spoken about, but Yvette, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome.